Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Ferghal Armstrong, and welcome to this episode of Cracking Addiction. And once again, we have with us Jesse Ball. Now, Jesse,
All
the
right.
last time we hi, the last time we spoke, we spoke about your experiences with substances and your journey to the point of realization that things had to change. You're now a very successful individual who's doing amazing things, which we'll get to. But there was a time when you were just 2 days sober in a rehab. And what I'm interested in is your wisdom and expertise that got you through the early phases of your recovery. What happened? What did you do? And how can you teach others to follow in your footsteps?
I think willingness was a big part. Like, first and foremost, I was willing to do whatever it took. And a big part of that was listening to advice. There was a lot of people who had walked the path before me, and I listened to what they said. I'm talking about my counsellor, at the rehab I went to, who was about 13 years sober. So I had a really good connection with him. So I listened when he talked, and I did what he suggested to do.
I'm curious because I bet you that guy didn't say anything different from all the previous counselors that you didn't listen to. Or did he? Did he say something different? What made the message relate to you then and not previously to all, when you were in front of therapists for so many years?
Well, I was completely honest with this counsellor, where I wasn't previously with all the others. I had
Ah,
certain
right.
behaviours which I felt very shameful about,
Yeah.
and I was able to be honest and vulnerable with this particular counsellor.
Hmm. Why? What did he do? What did he say that made you feel safe to be honest?
He made me feel respected. I really connected with just him as a person. He was quite like kind of like this no bullshit character. It was quite serious and stern, and pretty much built a connection with me. But then just sort of called me out on my shit as well. Like, he pretty much said, "Your life's burning to the ground, and I know you know that. So what are you going to do about it?" And that was effective because I was ready to make change. I think if I wasn't ready, that wouldn't have landed. But the fact that this therapist had lived experience, would build a connection, and then he sort of called me out as well, I felt almost obliged to myself to do the right thing and be willing to accept help.
So it's really a combination, isn't it? It's a combination of the right soil and the right seed, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, it's like the
So
perfect
so if
storm.
you're interested like me in trying to replicate this,
Yeah.
there's only so much I can do. I can sow my seeds on stony ground, or I can sow them on fertile ground. But you had to be receptive to it, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah, correct.
So but he made you feel connected in some way that unlocked your potential for change, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And there were a few things that stick out, like conversations he had. I remember once I admitted to him sort of what I'd been up to, and him kind of just looking at me in the eyes and staring at me and saying, It's okay. Like, I don't think you're a horrible person. I think you're okay, but you just need to get well."
Mm, yeah. So very much he viewed your past as a symptom of a dependency rather than a moral failing. Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. That was a big part of
Yeah.
it.
So there was a complete lack of judgment, but he did call you out in the bullshit.
Yeah.
So how did he tread that fine line? Because being called out in bullshit can come over as very judgy as well, can it not?
um, yeah, yeah, it is a
So
fault.
what was going on there? How were you?
Well, I think because he earned my respect first,
Ah,
just from the way he was, then it was okay that he called me out. Like, and another
mm,
example of him calling me out was, I think I was 4 weeks or 3 weeks at this particular rehab, and he said I should extend, a couple of weeks, and I was kind of like, oh, I need to get back to work, and he's like, no, you don't, and he's showing me my kind of my life story and how, before getting to rehab, I'd I would have sort of these psychoses from drug use most weekends. And he's like, "What about all this stuff? Like, you're not going back to work. What do you want about?"
Yeah.
It was that kind of calling out, just that bit of a reality check. That's because I had a lot of respect for him, and I think the fact
Yeah.
that he had lived experience was quite inspirational as well.
Ah, right. So perhaps this is an issue that you need to have a lived experience to actually call someone across the threshold into accepting help. Is that what you're saying?
I think it helps, but look, I wonder as well if there are other therapists at this rehab that didn't have lived experience, and I have a
Yeah.
feeling if they were my therapist, I think I still good chance would have got well because
Mm.
I was ready. I think there are a few ingredients, that they're having the right therapist, being ready, but I think that the most important ingredient was that I was ready within myself to make that change because ultimately no one else could have made that for me, right? It had to be me.
It did have to be you, but yeah, as I said to you before, I wish we could bottle it.
Mm,
Something happened to you. So what happened then? You were in rehab for how long?
5 weeks, all that.
And then what happened? You went back into the big bad world.
I did. As I mentioned, I listened to all the advice and acted on it. It was the first time in my life I put in 110% on something. I remember my counselor said to me, if you put in 100%, I'll put in 110. And so I put in 110 as well. So I literally, I'm quite proud to say this, I couldn't have done a more thorough routine, and I've stuck to that when I got out. So for me, that looked like therapy 5, 6 days a week. I was doing meetings every day, like recovery meetings. I was calling people every day. 12-step, fellowship was a big part of my recovery journey. I just did everything that was suggested to do and allow and minimize the risk to a relapse. So that meant completely cutting off my old friendship group. I told all my loved ones what I was doing to hold myself accountable. They still didn't believe me that I was going to get sober, I think, until I was about 6 months. um, yeah, essentially what I'm saying is I treated it like my life depended on it, but because I realized it did.
So you minimized the risk and you maximized the growth potential.
Yeah.
And that was attending meetings practically every day, holding yourself accountable.
Yeah.
What was in your routine? Because, with the best will in the world, a meeting lasts what, an hour and a half?
Yeah, that's right.
What do you
So
do when you're at home? What was going on there?
so in the morning I'd go for a walk every morning, which was really important. I'd just get as
Hmm.
soon as I'd wake up, I'd drink some water and put on my shoes and go for a 20-minute walk up to an hour. And that
Yeah.
was really helpful because no matter how I woke up in the morning, which often was pretty how you going, the first few months of recovery, to say the least, like lots of sort of nightmares and feelings and emotions coming up. But that walk was huge. Just getting out of the
Right.
house and then coming back, trying to eat well. I played a lot of video games, which that kept me safe. I wasn't going
Yeah.
out to social events, doing any risky behavior. So it was more so what I wasn't doing as well. Like I wasn't hanging around anyone that used. I wasn't even going out at times like late at night. I'd just make sure I was always in a safe place.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think just like eating healthy, drinking enough water, exercising every day, the meeting and the video games throughout the day. If I wasn't at therapy, that kind of just kept me occupied, kept me busy.
So you needed to be occupied. You needed contemplation during exercise, and you cut off your previous relationships. Now that's very brave. I mean, I've heard stories from a number of patients that they think they can do this and they're committed and they go to meetings, but they won't cut off their former connections with drug using peers. Do you think it's possible to actually achieve abstinence whilst maintain relationships with people who continue to use drugs?
I guess anything's possible, but I know for me it would have been extremely difficult. It was hard. It
Yeah,
was hard enough. Like everything I just described before that I've done, I
yeah,
still had days where I almost used. And
really.
that was giving it 110%. So I think if I gave it 109%,
Hmm.
I probably would have relapsed if you get what I'm saying. So like allowing any room for error in just wasn't worth it, and that was really drilled into me at rehab. That this disease, illness, addiction, whatever this is trying to kill me. And I had time to reflect on that in rehab and the seriousness of what I was doing to myself, and that I had my whole life ahead of me. And if I keep going down this path, that it'd be fatal. So I think that seriousness helped me, put in that 110%. Mm.
So you said you were going to use a couple of times during your early recovery. I want to know what exactly stopped you.
So the first week I got out, that weekend, I had a close friend of mine
Yeah.
who he said, "I know you can't use drugs, but surely you can drink." Which are drugs, right? Like I know it's like they say alcohol and drugs, but it's really saying like apples and fruit. It's kind of
Yeah.
ridiculous when you think about it. But anyway, I almost did. I almost went and drank with him. So I'm like, surely I can still drink alcohol. And what I
Right.
did was, I remembered what they told me in rehab, and they said, if you're going to use, call someone first. So
Yeah.
I called this guy Chris, he had a few months clean time up, and he didn't tell me not to use, but he just told me, well, last time I did that, ended up putting a needle in my arm, and it didn't turn out well. And I thought, oh, that doesn't sound good. So, and that
Right.
helped me. I didn't drink. I told my friends probably not a good idea, and that was
Yeah.
really effective. Like I don't think my own voice of reasoning would have been effective, but someone else who had lived it was
Hmm.
really helpful. It was enough to stop me.
So you actually had to have the accountability from someone else to call
Yeah,
out the delusion, the self delusion that
yeah,
you could go
and
back to your friendship circle
yeah,
and be safe.
and that's happened time and time again. It's always been someone
Yeah.
else's voice of reasoning in early recovery, which
Yeah.
ultimately helped me not go ahead with using.
Yeah. So the voice of reason, someone else's voice of reason during those really weak, vulnerable moments was the thing that was the difference between success and failure for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I just want to say as well, like on the like the this idea of leaving old friendships. Like I acknowledge that can be really hard. Like for me, I was hanging around with the same group of guys from the age of almost some of them like 6, 7 years old. Like we
Hmm.
went through primary school, high school together, then we used together. And I had to
Hmm.
leave a lot of those friendships, and I thought I was sort of giving them the cold shoulder. Like it felt like I was doing something really wrong. But really, all I was doing
Hmm.
was putting myself first. And what happened amazingly was then I became the topic of conversation. Like, oh my God, like Jesse's got clean. Like maybe some of us can do that too. And a few of them did get clean.
Right.
Uh, a few of them didn't. But I look back now, and although it was a hard decision at the time, it was definitely the best one I ever made. Well, and it wasn't like I
Yeah.
said, get stuffed, I want nothing to do with you. It just said, if you want to catch up, you can come around for lunch. My parents are here. Or you can
Yeah.
catch up for a coffee. But I'm not going to be coming around Friday and Saturday nights anymore because this recovery thing is really serious to me and I can't be around.
So going back to the voice of reason, you need a voice of reason, don't you? Yeah, by that I mean you can't just go into recovery and think, okay, right, I'm going to call someone if I feel that I'm tempted. You've actually got to have that pre-existing relationship, which means you then have to acknowledge that you are going to be tempted and you can do it. So a second delusion would be, you know what, I've got this. I don't need any help.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So it pays to be, I always say vigilant. I don't know if that's the right word, but it pays to be organized in advance for things to
Hmm.
go wrong because things will go wrong. That's what my
Yeah.
experience has been.
Yeah.
They say lots of things in recovery, and one of them is like we can't. It's a disease of thinking. It's our thinking that's broken, not whether that's our problem. Which, like,
Hmm.
I don't know if I like what to believe sometimes, but that makes sense to me. Like my thinking
Yeah.
today can still tell me like using can seem like a good idea sometimes.
Yeah. So you've got to plan a recovery. You've got to have that voice, that external voice. You've got to have a relationship with someone. And the paradox of that is you've also got to cut off the relationships you've got with drug users. You've got to establish a new relationship, at least with one person that you can call when the mind worm starts talking, saying, "Yeah, just once, you've got this." And I suppose really, there's the idea that you might be able to control it or use just one more time and be all right. That mind worm really speaks to the fact that a relapse doesn't happen instantly. It happens like the day before or the week before. Yeah, yeah. That's when you start giving yourself permission. And that isn't that the danger time when you really do have to phone someone.
That's exactly right. For me, my experience is stamping it out early is a good idea. And what I mean by that
Yeah,
is when I'm having those thoughts, oh, you know what? Maybe I could have like today, for example, it might be like, oh, maybe like next year when I hit 30, I can have a few drinks, on my birthday, you know.
yeah,
And what I'll do is I'll call someone straight away when those thoughts come up and like, hey, what do you think about this? And that's all I need to say. And
yeah,
instantly I'm relieved of this idea that I even need to do that.
yeah,
And I think that
yeah,
my experience has shown me the earlier I do that, the easier it is. And then the less
yeah.
power that thought has over me. There's been times where I've had that thought and I've left it a few days and it becomes more and more convincing as time goes on. So I can see why people would eventually act on it.
And I suppose in the early recovery, you're even more vulnerable to those thoughts. Now you've got 4 years of resilience behind you. You can you can leave it a day before you address it without too much harm. Is that right?
Yeah, I can. It's just uncomfortable.
Yeah, sure,
It's,
sure. So what I'm hearing then is that you need to change your relationships, move away from drug using peers, move towards the voice of reason, and use that voice of reason to start addressing the mind worms that open the door to relapse. Do you think that's the key to early recovery, or is there something else? And I mean, you also talked about the routine, didn't you? Getting up in the morning and going for that walk, doing the contemplation.
yeah, having a pretty rigid routine helps as well. And
Yeah,
something I sort of enjoy. And at first, like for me, I really enjoyed the process of early
yeah,
recovery, although it was hard. I think a
yeah.
big part of that was I was around people that inspired me as well. Like there were some people I met in early recovery who had pretty awesome lives, and I wanted to be like them. So I saw that was the goal, not to necessarily be them,
Hmm.
but it made recovery attractive, and I think that was really important as well.
Yeah, we might talk about that in the next chat that we have, making recovery attractive. But for now, Jess, sadly, we've run out of time, and I really want to thank you for your wisdom as always. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That's all for today, folks. My name is Dr. Ferghal Armstrong, and this has been Cracking Addiction.